Okay, so Michael Jeffries got indicted on he got indicted on the 17th, but he was arrested today in the Eastern District of New York, which is close to where the diddler is. So Michael Jeffries and his boyfriend Matthew, and then their friend James, aka Jim Jake, aka Mrs. Cook, aka Todd. So Michael Jeffries was the CEO of Abercrombie, which had all the shirtless models, and the cool kids only shopped there, and the whole place smelled like the disgusting Abercrombie cologne. And he's like 80 years old now, and his boyfriend's like 65 or 68, or how old is he now? He's remember, this was a dude. So he was like 80, 81. He was married to a woman, but he decided he was gay, and then he said he didn't like young, old, fat, skinny, and so he said he only wanted good-looking people, and we want to market to cool, good-looking people, and he was making like 48 million bucks a year. He was, but the business was terrible, and so he was actually was making like 71 million bucks a year, and the store went downhill, and then they fired him. And after they fired him because he was the worst CEO in the world, basically, and the share price fell 40%. And then he quit or he got fired at 11 consecutive quarters of negative sales, and everybody was happy when he left, and he also kept his pension. And then and yeah, he has a son, but he lives separately from his wife, and then so he was living with Matthew, who was born in 1963, which makes him 37, 47, like 60, and they got three dogs. And Matthew ran the Jeffries family office, which uh, invests all of Jeffries' money, but it's even more of a disaster than Abercrombie. So now, blah blah blah. So yeah, and the drivel of the indictment is that Michael was the CEO of Abercrombie, and he ran the Jeffries family office, which ran all of his um, income and assets, because this guy had like hundreds of millions of dollars, and so from being CEO, so he took that money and he invested it in places. He lived in Ohio because that's where Abercrombie was based, but he had offices or properties in New York. And then Matthew was his romantic partner and also worked for the Jeffries office and facilitated their social life and managed their travel and their properties. And then we got this third guy named James, also known as Mrs. Cook. I'm gonna call it, or Todd, we'll just call him Todd. He was a pervert. Well, they were all perverts, allegedly. So between 2008 and 2015, they ran a sex trafficking business. Well, call it a business or whatever you want to call it. But since they had a ton of money and see where this is going, so Jeffries and Matthew paid dudes to travel through the US and internationally to meet Jeffries and Smith at really fancy hotels like in England, France, Italy, Morocco, and then they paid them for sex. And they did that by hiring those household staff to supervise the events, and they moved them, and they had physical spaces, and they probably used a jet. And then They gave them alcohol, poppers, other drugs, and then they had them dress up and wear toys. But in order to make sure that these guys were gonna perform, they had James travel to find and recruit these guys all over the U.S. and internationally, and so James would try out the guy first and make sure that that Matthew was gonna like him, and then if he was good, then he told Matthew, and then Matthew was like, "Yeah, bring this guy," and then Michael and Matthew and James were sneaky. So when they hired these guys, they probably told them they would be Abercrombie models and not tell them that they were going to sleep with the crusty 70-year-old Michael Jeffries. So they didn't tell them what they were going to do, which was put things into their butthole, including a high pressure enema, which involved inserting a garden hose up the butt, which was not probably part of the contract. And then during the interview, they were just like, "Hey, man, you're gonna hook up with Todd without knowing." And then, "Oh yeah, I was right." So see, it caused the men to believe that attending the sex event could yield modeling opportunities with Abercrombie or otherwise benefit their careers, or that not complying could harm their careers, including, among other things, referring directly and indirectly to modeling opportunities that did not exist, incorporating Abercrombie products into the events, and providing men with itineraries to the events that did not refer to the uh, Commercial Sex Act and instead pretend like they were going to a photo shoot. And then they physically groomed them, including shaving their junk without notice and taking away their clothes and wallets and cell phones so they couldn't access them, and then also making them sign NDAs so they couldn't tell anybody. And they tried to get straight men who were not gonna put things up their butthole and then force them to. And maybe that was like one of their thing, I don't know. And then they gave them alcohol and other drugs, and they had the staff watch and make sure that these guys didn't leave until Jeffries and Smith decided that they had to leave. Now, on more than one occasion, they either directed others or injected the men in their junk with a prescription grade Viagra, basically like a injectable Viagra, so that they could um, be aroused when they weren't aroused. And then none of these were medically indicated, so that means that they did not, no doctor prescribed this stuff. So, and that caused them to suffer painful reactions for several hours. And this happened on more than one occasion, including using the garden hose up their butt. And they did not or were unable to consent, which means they were probably drugged. So now they're charged with the three of them are charged with sex trafficking and interstate prostitution, which took place between at least 16 dudes, and it started in December 2008 and it went to 2012. But now Michael Jeffries is like 80. He's probably too crusty, so he probably needs that injection for himself, and they're probably gonna seize his jet because he probably used the jet to like fly these people in and out. I don't know. So yeah. Now if we look at 18 United States Code, this is what he's charged with: coercion. Whoever knowingly persuades or coerces any individual to travel in interstate commerce to engage in prostitution or attempts to do so shall be imprisoned not more than 20 years. So he can get up to 20 years. And then we have coercion, which is threats. Basically, there's a whole bunch of these. So, any questions? Please post a comment.